Is this the beginning of the end of the Israel-America relationship? With tensions rising with the negotiations with Iran and midterms right around the corner, we're going to take a closer look at this relationship's past to see if there's any hints about the worrying future. This is The Deep Dive. Welcome back to The Deep Dive. I'm your host, Jacob Laznik, and it's so good to be back after a 2-week break. I have to say, not much has changed, which is kind of nice, but also a bit worrying. And as I said already, we're looking at a lot of tension between Israel and America right now. The negotiations with Iran, according to reports, are very worrying. The terms seem unacceptable to unfavorable in the Israeli public, and officials appear to be as privy to details as the common person is when the reports come out. This is very worrisome, but as America's 250th birthday is coming up, we wanted to take a closer look at this relationship and see if it's really on the edge of collapse, or if this relationship has a strong history, built with a solid foundation of values, and we're simply just catastrophizing. For a broader look at this issue and to hopefully clear up some of the noise, we're joined by presidential historian, author, friend of the podcast and J-Post, Gil Troy. Gil Troy, good to have you back.
Always great to be with you.
Thank you for being with us. A lot has changed since the last time we spoke on this show.
Yeah, a lot has changed, but a lot is the same. It's one of the strange things about Israel, from crisis to crisis. And yet the sun is always shining, and
the construction's it's moving on,
right?
it's progressing.
And the view's beautiful.
Yeah. So first I want to briefly recap, since last time you were here things were very different, and let's just see where we stand today, and then I think we'll move on. But the last time you appeared on the show, we were kind of at this this focal point of, there was a debate bichlal about, is Trump going to go for a deal, or is there going to be another round of aggression and strikes on Iran? And what we see now is kind of both happened. There were strikes, and there were also, now we're in this phase of a deal. So I just, obviously we're not going to go over the entire February, March operations and strikes and all the things. Much has changed. Khamenei was killed, his son replaced him, allegedly, even though no one's actually really seen him. And now we're currently in this framework between America and Iran, this a memorandum of understanding. How has it developed? What are your takes? What do you think?
Well, because I'm a historian, I like to go backwards. So let's go back, not 100 years ago, but just a year ago.
Sure.
There was a 12-day war. At that moment, if we'd gone the day before the 12-day war, even though we had already pushed back against Iran, we saw Iran as almost invulnerable.
Yeah.
And Iran, for 47 years or 45 years, had been very, very careful to use all kinds of proxies and never get its hands dirty and never sacrifice its own people. And what did we discover in the 12-day war? A, that they're vulnerable. B, that we had total domination of the skies, which had come a year earlier, but whatever. And we did them tremendous damage. And on the 12th day, Donald Trump in some ways helped us, not only by bringing in the bunker busters, but he ended it.
Yeah.
And the expectations then were, wow, we've hit him hard. Now, had we done a 25-day war, the second round, and said, you know what? We know the regime isn't going to collapse because it takes a long time. We know that we're not going to have peace on earth and goodwill toward men because that's utopian.
Yeah.
We would have said, oh my goodness. As you pointed out, we eliminated Khamenei. We have severely degraded their infrastructure. Their nuclear program is now in the dumps.
We also established that we could do it again.
And again, estimates of damage are from $300 billion to $1 trillion. And then we'd say, oh my goodness. But what happened? We, and I say the Americans, the Israelis, I think our leadership and the media allowed expectations to balloon, and we didn't have a proper endgame. And then that was one problem. The second problem was the whole issue of the Strait of Hormuz. And all of a sudden, the Iranians had a card.
Right.
We just came back from the United States of America. And my son pointed out that every time he was in a health club, every time he heard the news, all you heard with Iran was oil and markets.
Right.
If it's a financial issue, Americans are going, what the heck? If it's an issue of security, then it's a different issue. And so the sale has not been made. The expectations were not well managed, and the sale about the threat to Americans of this country, thousands of miles away, has not been properly met. And so as a result, we're in this strange stalemate. But life is long. Anyone who tells me, assuredly, A, we won, or B, we lost, is in La La Land, pushing an agenda. We're still, as we say in Hebrew, in the Iruah, in the event.
Yeah. I tend to agree. The thing that's hard for me to kind of wrap my head around is I think kind of as soon as the strikes happened, something that crossed really everyone's mind, or at least should have, was the issue of the Strait of Hormuz. I, I feel like it was kind of an obvious reach that, Iran would try to do, because it's kind of the only card they would ever really be able to obtain. And looking at how things played out, I understand there's obviously, securing it, making sure Iran can't control it is a very difficult logistic and risky thing to do. I understand that 100%. And obviously, as with all of these things, there's so much going on behind the scenes that we'll never be privy to, or will only be privy to in a couple of decades. But it seems that, the joint operations between Israel and the United States were able to establish air superiority within a matter of hours, if not days. And then everything else that they kind of wanted to strike and eliminate and remove a threat, they more or less were able to do. So why do you think the Hormuz was able to get to the position that it was today? What makes it so difficult and hard to seize? Because I also remember that there were initial reports that Iran was starting to lay mines in the ocean. So it's not even that it caught us by surprise. It was kind of happening in front of our faces, but the jets were kind of flying over Tehran, and less about, you know what I mean? So
It's an excellent question, and historians are going to be debating this forever.
yeah,
Partially because it's not only the problem of not really knowing, but there's also all kinds of spin. So we hear from insiders at CENTCOM, the Central Command of the United States military, which, by the way, has done an amazing job, and we should point out the amazing integration
absolutely.
between Israel and the United States militarily has been really just been extraordinary. So people in CENTCOM said, we knew, we warned, and it was the politicos who didn't listen.
Okay.
So that's one theory, because it would seem that in any war game, in any wartime scenario, you always have to think about what's the enemy going to do, right?
Right.
The notion that the enemy is passive, or underestimating the enemy. We saw what happened on October 7th when you underestimate the enemy, and we saw here, in a sense, what happens is when you assume the enemy is going to be passive.
Absolutely.
So we have to have faith in the professionalism, both of the Israeli military and the American military, that they anticipated it. I think, and this is just speculation, connecting the dots.
I won't bind you to
We
it.
have to use the V word, Venezuela. I think the speed with which Donald Trump was able to change things in Venezuela and change the regime, although basically he just eliminated arrested the president,
Right.
and put in the vice president. And we see, by the way, the disaster now. By the way, it's heartbreaking to watch what's happening with the earthquake, the double earthquakes in Venezuela.
Yeah.
I think there was a thought that, this is it. We're just going to see regime change and it's going to collapse, and boom, it'll happen.
Yeah.
And look, Donald Trump has done a lot for Israel and has done a lot for the world. But Donald Trump has also done a lot of damage in the world in his approach. His approach is incredibly impulsive. His approach is incredibly results oriented, and his approach is incredibly impatient. And I think we've seen how that kind of worked in Venezuela. It worked in the 12-day war, and it still hasn't worked. But as I said, we're still not sure
Right.
in this round.
Yeah, I'm not gonna. I think it's too early to say, whether this round of, fighting is rather won or lost. I would say that what does concern me, and what's really interesting, again, don't know any of the specifics because we're not in the room, but the details that are coming out of what's included in the memorandum of understanding. So obviously, the United States is saying one thing, Iran is saying something else, and the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, a little bit of overlap, and they're kind of obfuscating every which way they want to make it seem more favorable for each side. But from what we can gather of what's being discussed, it's hard to kind of see this as a good deal, or as something that's, I would say, marginally better than the previous agreement. Now, I'm not going to defend the JCPOA. It obviously had its issues. It wasn't perfect. There were obviously some side effects that were definitely disastrous. I just don't see by the metrics of what we're hearing how this is really any better. And also, I think the fact that if the reports are true that Israel isn't really involved in any way, where kind of Israel's finding out at the same time that we're finding out about what the details conclude, it is a bit worrying. So is there another way to look at this, or is that just kind of what we have to deal with right now?
Again, we're in the middle of chaos,
Yeah.
and we have a president who loves to feint and posture, and we also have to look at the American electoral timetable.
Of
The
course.
midterms are in November. How much of what's going on now is just kind of Trump running down the clock, knowing, in a sense, and one of the things what I most trust is I trust the Mueller's arrogance. I trust the Revolutionary Guard's arrogance. I believe that they're going to continue to stick it to the Americans. They're going to continue to rub Donald Trump's nose in the dirt and say, we won, and be arrogant.
Right.
And I think Trump might be willing to absorb those blows until November. If the Democrats come in November, he's got a whole pack of trouble
Yeah.
with impeachments, investigations, constant headaches. If after November, and from historical perspectives, November's in a flash of an eye, right? It's
Yeah.
it's momentary. It's just around the corner.
Right.
Where we're impatient, and then after November, he feels like, okay, now I can go back for another round with Iran. Then who knows what's going to happen? So that's
Absolutely.
one timetable that we have to look at. The second timetable is what's going on internally within Iran. I threw out that figure of 300 million to $1 trillion, 300 billion
billion, yeah.
to $1 trillion worth of damage that the Iranian economy has sustained. At the beginning of January, the Iranians were ready to rebel.
Right.
How much more suffering will they endure? And how angry will they be if they start seeing their new leadership take resources and instead of rebuilding the economy, start going either nuclear or ballistic?
Which, if we look at historically, is probably what they're going to do.
Right. So I mean, they had their own tell. So the notion, and we were also misled by the speed with which the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. These kind of regimes, it takes a long time for the internal processes to work their way through and for them to collapse. I'm not predicting collapse.
Yeah.
But all I'm saying is that those are two different timetables we have to watch. What's happening on the American timetable, what's happening in the Iranian internal timetable, and then the question is what's happening really with the negotiations.
Right.
But every day when I see the Iranians being more and more arrogant, I say, keep going.
Right.
keep playing, because at the end of the day, Donald Trump wants to be a winner.
Right.
And what's also interesting, I think, to look at is there's a Republican caucus. Everybody focuses on J.D. Vance and Tucker Carlson and Candace Owen. Look at Senator Phil Gramm. Look at Secretary of State and National Security Advisor Marco Rubio.
Right.
Look at the voices within the Republican Party that are saying, whoa, this is looking terrible, and we support Israel. And we are afraid of Iran. Let's go back to the original reason why the United States got involved both last June and this winter and spring.
Yeah, no, for sure. I don't want to pontificate too much on Iran, because obviously we're still in this murky water area that no one really knows how it's going to end up. I just felt that we had to do this catch up because I think it's funny to see like the two sides.
Circle,
close the circle for now. I'm not going to say it's fully closed because let's be real.
Right.
We'll be back in a few months and talking about it.
Close the ringlet.
Yeah, exactly. But now I don't agree with the viewpoint at all. Actually, I could say that. But a lot of if you look at the media in Israel, a lot of people are really catastrophizing. I don't think it's a hard concept to grasp, but a lot of people are really freaking out at how this has developed, how the talks of starting to go towards a MOU that doesn't look so favorable, and the fact that Israel isn't really privy to a lot of the details or talks or being consulted. And I think a lot of people are taking this very far and taking this into posturing that like this is somehow the end or the beginning of the end of like the Israel-America relationship. Now, I think that's insane, but obviously two different countries, their interests will diverge in times, and like it's all good. I think we'll just need to take a breath. But as we know, this weekend is America's 250th birthday, and you've recently worked on some material for the America's 250th, and specifically about the relationship between Israel and the United States. So before we go into like the whole broadness of America at 250, I want to talk about this Israel-America relationship.
So yes, I came out with two different projects to honor the July 4th. One is the third of my essential guides, which there are over 100,000 copies of the Essential Guide to October 7th and the Essential Guide to Zionism and Anti-Zionism Circulation. And now the third
reading.
one is, although we keep them short and punchy with infographics. So while the topic is heavy, we try to make it very accessible. This is an 80-page document about the U.S.-Israel partnership, honoring the 250th anniversary. And one thing that you see again and again is there hasn't been one president who didn't get frustrated with Israel at one moment or another. And there are a lot of presidents who actually like dropping F-bombs around Israel, which I think kind of shows a kind of intimacy and intensity and a kind of love-hate thing that shows the depth of the relationship as well as the volatility of the relationship. So yes, this has been a terrible 2 weeks. Not only are we seeing problems on the Republican side with J.D. Vance being so dismissive and arrogant and Donald Trump kind of going his own way, and the Tucker Carlson chorus always just with their sneers. But we've also seen in the Democratic Party, the three members of Congress, three congressional candidates in New York who are deeply, deeply anti-Israel and whose anti-Israelism is central to their identity get ahead.
Right.
And just now we saw in Colorado a similar kind of thing.
Correct.
So let's take a breath. What's terrifying about this moment is that we never had, in both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, such hard anti-Zionists. We've had soft anti-Zionists, but we've had hard anti-Zionists who are more and more central to the party, especially in the Democratic side, and central to the conversation. Because we also live in an age of social media where they're able to dominate that kind of conversation. We've always had, unfortunately, what I call soft Zionists or conditional Zionists. We've seen the American-Israel relationship always be seen anytime there's a crisis as, on the edge of rupture.
Right.
So where the historical perspective helps us is to say, okay, this is maybe a low, but it's not a rupture. And that leads to the second project I just did, which is with my friend David Suisse of the Jewish Journal, where we listed 250 reasons to just thank America. 200 of them are wearing our hats as Americans, as an American historian, as an American immigrant. Suisse was born in Casablanca, grew up in Montreal, and now lives in Los Angeles. We just want to say thank you. And then 50 of them are specific thank yous as Jews. And where it connects is that when you ultimately look at the DNA of America and the DNA of Israel, liberalism, Americanism, Zionism overlap. They rhyme much more than they clash. And that's why, while this might be a moment of tremendous tension and we have to deal with it, and these are serious warning signs about what's happening both in the Republican, it's not really the Republican Party, it's the Republican outsiders and the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
We also have to see that the fundamentals remain quite strong.
See, and I was reading into it and I saw that one of the questions that you posed is, why does America focus on investing on this relationship with little Israel as opposed to the neighboring countries? And that's because our DNA is a lot more rhymy than our neighbors. So I think this is completely anecdotal based off of what I see, but what it appears to me is that a big contributor to this low in the Israel-America relationship, or at least the perception of the relationship, because at the end of the day, politicians on both sides of the parties are essentially, to some extent, posturing to what they think will get them elected. That's always like a current element. And I do think there's a big misconception or lack of education about what the Israel-America relationship looks like. I hear a lot of times that, Americans think that pallets of cash are just going to Israel and Israel has free healthcare and everyone's going to university on on the account of America, and America doesn't have healthcare because we don't have money for it because it's going straight to Israel, and nothing about like the defense budget credits or anything that it actually goes to. And I want to know your take on this. Do you think that's actually relevant? Do you think that's an important piece that America in general needs to focus on bringing back to the limelight? Because I think that misconception is very easy to repeat. I think if you don't know the truth, it's very easy to believe because money here means money not here. And yeah, so what's your take on that?
So I started writing this essential guide with the JPPI a year ago, in May. Why? Because Donald Trump was in Qatar. He came back with a plane and trillions of dollars of investments. Yeah. And everybody said, A, what you said, and then B, a second thing. One is they said, oh my goodness, we're wasting too much money on Israel. And B, we're not getting anything back.
Right.
And so I decided in the spirit of the 1970s to do a transactional analysis of the relationship. And one of the things I have to say I was shocked by, and this is a critique of the Israeli government, it's a critique of the American Jewish establishment, is we don't have a proper vocabulary. So one of the things I want to call Israel, and I'm doing this in the Essential Guide, is I call it the DIY and the ROI ally. DIY, from do it yourself, it's the defend it yourself ally. What other ally says, no, we're going to do it. We don't need you to fight for us. We're going to fight. Now, right. Sometimes you fight together, but that's only rare. On the whole, we do it ourselves, DIY, and ROI, return on investment ally. And why is it the return on investment ally? The United States government spends $3.5 billion, which, as you point out, goes back into the U.S. defense industry on its relationship with Israel.
Also, in the grand scope of the defense budget, that's
nothing. The United States government spends $3.5 billion on renting office space that it doesn't use.
Right.
The American people spend $3.5 billion on dressing up their pets. So I think if we take that $3.5 billion and put it in perspective, we say, oh my goodness, it's not a lot of money, it's a drop in the bucket. And then the more important part, the transactional analysis. DIY? No, not just, it's ROI, return on investment. It's not just that Israel defends itself. It's not just that Israel is critical as an intelligence ally, as a defense ally, as a strategic ally, as a diplomatic ally. Put that aside, because unfortunately Americans focus too much on domestic and not enough on foreign.
Right.
Imagine, and I say this in my introduction, imagine you live in Kansas in the center of the country and you're driving to work. How are you getting there? With Waze.
Right.
Right? You're using your car has all kinds of anti-collision devices established by Intel and others right here in Israel, right here in Jerusalem. You can probably see it from this beautiful view.
Yeah.
God forbid you have an accident, and they're going to put the bandage on called the Izzy, which is named after an Israeli medic who in the 1990s said, "Wait a minute, we're using bandages from the 1930s. Let's have a new kind of bandage." If God forbid there's a burn, they'll put on that special pineapple-based gel that helps eliminate dead skin, which has been perfected in Gaza. So one of the things we have to do is make the case. Explain, for a long time, we were able to coast on shared values, common DNA, and of course, that's still there. But we have to see interest. At the end of the day, Gadi Taub, the writer, says, Israel has to be Saudi Arabia. No one loves Saudi Arabia. No one talks about our common values with Saudi Arabia. But America supports Saudi Arabia because it's convenient. Mm-hmm. I don't want us to be Saudi Arabia, and we're not Saudi Arabia. But I think we have to make the Saudi Arabian case, too, that there are payoffs.
Okay.
Not just ideological payoffs, but actual practical payoffs to every single American in their daily life and to the United States of America in its collective life.
So there's also obviously an element of return on investment in the defense field as well, because, there's this whole element of we get to try out and use technologies in real time, which every defense company could only wish that they would have a partner to be able to test over and over and over again the way that Israel does. But if you take that out of the equation, and obviously the examples that you just said, I feel that kind of the average American has grown accustomed to all of these advancements of beneficial uses in daily life. And I think the question that they're asking themselves is, yes, but what is Israel doing for me right now? As in, they've taken all these great things for granted, and they're kind of looking for more, which I obviously don't agree with that framing. I think that's a very shallow way to look at it. But nevertheless, what would you say to someone like that?
So, look, by the way, I just want to reemphasize it. You're absolutely right. What goes on on the defense side is, the F-35.
Right.
Israel made 600 modifications, which is making it a living laboratory. And think of all the billions of dollars that it saved Lockheed and it saved the United States government.
And we had the first confirmed downing of a plane. So obviously,
right.
Again, just feeding data into feeding data.
And we're working now on drone defense. Which is actually quite surprising that the United States of America hasn't taken the lead. And we've been working on anti-missile defense and. So there is the practical argument to be made. But we also have to step back. Unfortunately, there really, in a way that wasn't true, let's say, in the 1960s and 1970s, there isn't one America, there are many different Americas. And different Americans want to hear different things. So one of the things I also talk about is the 5 gates of friendship, or 5 languages of love. You're newly married, right? Everybody knows about the love. What's your love language, right? So we have to say that the love language that progressives need to hear, the love language that national security types need to hear, the love language that J.D. Vance transactional types need to hear is different. So when we talk about progressives, let's talk about the Statue of Liberty. Let's talk about immigration. Let's talk about liberalism. Let's talk about fighting homophobia. Let's talk about fighting sexism. Let's talk about fighting jihadis. Let's talk about who Hamas and Hezbollah and the Iranians really are. When we talk about the national security issue, we can go to what we've been talking about earlier about the defense and the diplomacy. When we talk about the transactional analysis, it's a different emphasis. I think our diplomats, and again, I think the American Jewish community has to start talking in these different languages and emphasizing different things and seeing who our supporters are and who aren't. I think we spend so much time agonizing, A, about Jewish anti-Zionists, and B, about harsh AOC, Bernie Sanders anti-Zionists. They have, Einat Wolf has a great line, they have a vocabulary of 10. Genocide, oppressor, settler colonialism. We're not going to convince them.
Right.
We can't let them run the conversation. We do. We have to go past and we have to speak to what I call the soft Zionists, the conditional Zionists. The Zionists who are essentially pro-Israel, the Americans who are essentially pro-Israel, but Israel's always on probation. And when they read about violent settlers or they read about Bibi Netanyahu who's been demonized, they say, I give up on Israel. Well, they'll come back if we make the case. So I think we have to be a little bit more thoughtful and a little bit more surgical in our narrowcasting rather than broadcasting.
Hmm.
And at the same time, where we do have to broadcast broadly is on things like who burns American flags and Israeli flags at rallies? The anti-Zionists.
Right.
I think we have to, and I have a chart in this essential guide called braided bitterness. And I talk about 6 different forms of anti-Americanism, from a kind of suicidal pacifism to a conspiracism, which has taken over the left and the right, to a disdain for America, to an illiberal liberalism. And those 6 roots all come together in anti-Zionism. We have to make the case that anti-Zionism is anti-Americanism. Anti-Semitism is a thought disease that is a warning sign for every society in crisis. And beyond that, we have to stop being defensive. And that's why I'm listing 250 reasons to love America, to thank America, to delight in America. The more Americans are proud of America, the more Americans lean into their liberalism, their pride, their patriotism, their strength, their anti-jihadism, their anti-Zionism, the more we will have a healthy relationship. The health of the relationship between Israel and America is dependent on the health of Americans' relationship to themselves, to their ideals, to their history, and to their country. And it's a tragedy that this 250th anniversary has turned into a partisan shooting match.
Yeah.
There's another expression one could use, but I'm being elegant. A partisan shooting match and a power struggle rather than a celebration.
Yeah. Now, it seems to me, I feel like when we talk about discussions and how to message, it leaves me with another question, which is constructive or legitimate criticism dead, or is there still a way to do it? Because I think there's obviously ways to criticize Israel. I do it all the time, in a way where it's constructive, you understand there's an issue without having to demonize the entire entity. And I think that also applies to America. I think it feels like in public discourse, people don't have that ability. You have to always be on the pro side or always on the defensive. And there's none kind of this middle ground where you can kind of just say, this is the actual issue. This is actually how it plays out. But this edition doesn't really proliferate, which is why we are seeing small drop of money going to Israel turns into we don't have healthcare. And I think the two real issues have absolutely nothing to go with each other. And I know that in America, domestic, if we're talking about, midterms, healthcare is obviously a very sensitive issue that a lot of Americans care about. And the fact that they're still intertwined really boggles my mind. So I'm wondering if there's even a point in kind of having messaging around that, or if people just don't know how to separate two things.
So look, we have to step back and go structural, right? And we're now in this age of social media. We're now in this age of what they call the great sift in America, where people live in their own tribes and their own bubbles. It happens a little bit here too, although we're too small and we're much more on top of one another.
Yeah.
But when you have the great sift, and you have the social media problem, things tend to get all or nothing. Look how polarizing things are around Donald Trump.
Right.
When the second Iran war started, you could tell if I hate Trump, I hate the Iran war. What's fascinating was here in Israel, I might hate Bibi, but I still supported the war because I could distinguish, right? I could make that distinction. So it is definitely a problem where on the street, in social media, in too many circles, there's no room for constructive criticism. There's no room for patriotic criticism. There's no room for balance. But this is the what podcast? The Jerusalem Post podcast. Every day I open up my Jerusalem Post, except on Sabbath, and I read constructive criticism. I read a range of views. And you see, what's happening is, I call this the problem of the silenced majority. Most Americans, most Israelis, most Jews are decent, thoughtful people who can live in a world where I agree with you on 7 of 12 things,
right?
And then I'll vote for you. And if I
can disagree with you on 9 things, but I can still give you credit for
right.
ABC.
But the insanity of the extremes is leading to a distortion. Why? Because they're bullies. Look what's happening with the Israel issue now, especially on the left. Scott Wiener, not my favorite politician. State legislator in California, in many ways was pro-Israel. Last couple of months, as he's trying to run for Nancy Pelosi's congressional seat in San Francisco, has started using the G word, genocide, to show how holy he is. And so, of course, J Street is very happy with him.
Right.
I sit there and go, Scott, where are your principles? Just this week, we saw when he went to a gay and trans fest, he was yelled at and attacked. Why? Because he wasn't fast enough to call Israel a genocidal state. And
Right.
so because it wasn't fast enough, even though he's now calling Israel a genocidal state, they're calling him a genocider.
Correct.
So you have this core group of people who are fanatics. Once upon a time, they were fanatic about abortion, or they were fanatic 50 years ago or 70 years ago about communism. Now, a small group of people is incredibly fanatic about Israel, and they're trying to make Israel radioactive. And that's dangerous because it bullies the people in the center. So we have to take a breath. We have to, in America, in Israel, start rebuilding the center, not for Israel's sake, but for America's sake, and for the sake of a healthy, thoughtful democracy, where I can disagree with you sometimes and agree with you other times, where a patriot understands that the definition of a patriot is someone who loves his or her country because of its politicians, sometimes, but despite its politics always. And so this is a much, much, much deeper issue. And my hope, my fantasy, not my prediction, but my hope, my fantasy, my educational mission is to try to use the insanity around Israel as a mirror to say, do you really want to have this kind of politics? Do you really want to have this conversation about everything? Right now, we're really in the middle of a mania. And we've had previous manias. We had a mania over vaccinations.
Right.
We had a mania over masking. We've had a mania over Trump. So now Israel, the anti-Israel mania is the latest mania, and Israel's now this folk devil. It's not pleasant. It's not fun. But we have to figure out how to pull out of it. And that's why I keep trying to do what I do, which is facts, stories, ideas, values, and optimism. Will it work? I don't know, but it certainly makes me feel better.
So on that note, let's flip it a bit and let's look at, we talked obviously about Israel in this relationship in the DIY and the ROI. So let's take a closer look at America. We tend to think it's like, obviously it's just this big, strong, powerful ally, but I want to delve deeper both into like the specifics really of like how this relationship, like the beneficial side of the American partnership looks like, and also go into some of these reasons of other things about America that we should be grateful for. I think that would be a celebratory birthday fun way to kind of look at this, because I don't think it's actually so inherent. I think we intuitively just kind of think big, strong America help, and like that's it. And it's actually more complex than that.
So when we talk about the U.S.-Israel relationship, we should point out that in 1948, it's true that Harry Truman recognized Israel within 11 minutes, but America was very committed to an arms embargo in the Middle East and to trying to avoid an arms race. One of the beautiful things is that we not only talk about the relationship with the American government, but the American people. The American people, over 70% were supportive of Israel.
Until recently, but
right, but I'm saying in 1948, many Americans, many American veterans who had brought home souvenirs, gave up those souvenirs, gave up their weapons, which they had smuggled back, and they ended up being smuggled to Israel. And so even though the American government at the time was trying to be balanced, most Americans were indeed with Israel. And as you point out, throughout much of the relationship, 70-80% of the American people have been with Israel. Now we're at a low, but I think it's a soft low, not a hard low, and not a locked-in low. It was only after 1967 that Israel became so dependent on America as its main arms supplier. So what we see is there's a certain dynamic, but with each passing decade, Israel and America have become more intertwined. They've seen the degree to which they need one another. And it's strange. I mean, what does a big, powerful superpower of 350 million people need from a country of 10 million? Well, someone like Alexander Haig, who in the 1980s was a bit of a skeptic about Israel, all of a sudden went, wait a minute, we've got a landed Air Force base in Israel. It's called Israel, right? It's like a landed aircraft carrier. What could be better? Jesse Helms said a similar thing. American military people have said Israel's worth 5 or 10 or 20 CIAs. So there's the payoff that Israel has. But when we talk about America, there's this tension in America. And it goes back to Washington's farewell address. George Washington, first president, very elegantly says, I'm only going to serve 2 terms. And he gives a farewell address. Everybody remembers him saying, we want to be isolationist. We don't want to be involved in any outside wars. That's only half of what he said. He also said, we want to be idealists. We want to be a beacon to the world. And what we've seen is, for all America's faults, America has again and again been, what's the biblical phrase? A light unto the nations.
It resonates with us very well.
Right? Statue of Liberty, welcoming so many people. Why is it that even at this moment, when so many Americans love to bash America, so many outsiders want to join America? And they don't want to join America to destroy America. They want to join America to live the American dream. There still is the fact that America has created this phenomenon called the mass middle-class civilization. So many more Americans have a basic high quality of life. They have economic challenges, I know. But when you look, you see the two-car garage, you see the picket fence, you see the big, beautiful rolling lawn that's in neighborhoods that are not fancy. You go, wow, for all its challenges, America's still working. I don't understand how to live in a world where progressives don't believe in progress and conservatives don't conserve institutions. The only way you can progress is by leaning into America's failures from before and not say, oh, America is systemically racist, but wow, the America of 1776, which had slavery, soon had, after the Constitution was established and then some time passed, they had a clause that eliminated the slave trade. And America and Denmark and Great Britain were among the first to eliminate the slave trade. And then by 1865, there was no more slavery. And Americans died, Northerners died in order to help save blacks and unify the country. And then if we go back to 1963, 1965, 1967, civil rights, voters' rights, Martin Luther King, look at all the progress that's been made. If Martin Luther King didn't believe in America, there wouldn't have been progress. So progressives have to believe in progress. And conservatives have to conserve institutions because look at the institutions we've built. The Supreme Court, the Congress. Just this week, we saw the Supreme Court sometimes agree with President Trump, sometimes limit President Trump. The checks and balances work.
Right.
Now, what I want to celebrate when I talk about America is not just these big nerdy ideas. I want to celebrate the ice cream cone. I want to celebrate the first commercial pizzeria. I want to celebrate 1927 Murderers Row. Think about it. In 1927, Europe is Europe. They just finished World War I. They're building toward World War II. It's going to be one of the most murderous European centuries. What is Murderers Row in 1927? It's Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, the New York Yankees, leisure, fun. In our list of 250, 200 of them are fundamentally about America. 50 of them are ways Jews thank America, but of course they're ways that resonate for everybody else.
Right.
It's a mix. Technology. Everybody loves to complain about the environment. I grew up in a world where we knew that everybody smoked. Smog was constant. Acid rain was going to destroy our lakes. And the rivers, like the Cleveland Cuyahoga River, could burn up in a day. Today, smoking in America is down to 11%. Smog has mostly been eliminated. You can swim in the Cuyahoga River and the Hudson River, and acid rain has more or less been handled. And it's really important that Americans and Israelis hear this. In 1976, when they celebrated the bicentennial, the fundamental problems that everybody knew were unsolvable, like the Soviet Union, like the nuclear threat from the Soviet Union, like these environmental problems, have been solved. And they weren't just solved by government. They were solved by science, by technology, by thoughtful government intervention when necessary, and by cultural change. Give a hoot, don't pollute was the big campaign that taught us.
Yeah.
You know, we used to go around, I remember going around seeing just like everybody threw their cigarette butts and their soda cans on the side of the road. Now we don't. So it's really important that both America and Israel realize one essential thing. It's my favorite four-letter word: hope. Democracies run on hope. When we have despair, when we throw up our hands, we're not willing to roll up our sleeves. Zionism, Americanism, liberalism was always about rolling up your sleeves and making things better, and doing it because we had hope, because we knew tomorrow would be better than today. And this 250th anniversary should be a moment to celebrate America's achievements, to toast all the good that America continues to do in the world, to see there's still work to be done, but understand that by leaning into our successes and by fueling all the change with hope, we can get to a better America, we can get to a better Israel, we can get to a better world.
I certainly hope so. I think this really, on a personal note, I just returned from my honeymoon. And I was 2 weeks in Greece. I deleted like all the apps from my phone, no news, no WhatsApp, nothing. And in that space, obviously the first few days were really weird. I didn't really know what to do with all this free time. But then I was really able to actually just like relax and put things into perspective in a way that when you constantly are connected to your phone and the news, you're not able to do. And I know this sounds like I'm going off on a tangent, but I really think this applies to exactly what you're talking about, where I think on a large scale, if people were able to look past the partisan shooting match, as you put it, that the celebration has become, and really thought about things in the way that you're framing them, you could actually look and say like, okay, listen, like there are obviously issues today, issues that maybe we could be doing more on in solving them or not. But when you look at, when you take a look back and you see how things have progressed and you look at how things are progressing, I don't see how you come away with this with a message other than hope. I think it's like it's the trend. It's not the outlier that things will progress, things will get better. Yes, sometimes institutions, whatever, the guardrails are shook about, and there's clash and there's friction. But like, when is there not? But when you take a look back and you look at these things, you realize that like there's this, when it comes to America, there's this clear upward trend of progress and betterment. And I don't know. I guess we're one of the few platforms now that's actually discussed this, because anywhere else that you go,
No, I agree. Look, first of all,
you have to go
Mazel
to
Tov,
Jerusalem
right?
all the way.
No, it's an amazing thing. Look, think about what it means to get married, right? What it means to really sort of leap into the future and say, I want to build a life. And you're part of this extraordinary, crazy Israeli phenomenon, right? Where despite the fact that we've had wars, despite the fact that we had just hit our 1,000th day since October 7th, 3 of my kids have gotten married during that time. There's been the baby boom, which started days after October 7th.
Right.
And there's been a marriage boom. The numbers are through the roof. And as a result, Israel scores number 8 on the happiness index when you take standard of living into account. But when you talk about quality of life, it goes up to number 4.
Mm-hmm.
Because people have a sense of meaning, people have a sense of community, people have a sense of tradition, and that's what marriage is all about. It's not we're just 2 dots in the universe and we're just going to be together. We're going to be a part of a broader thing called the Jewish people, a broader thing called life, a broader thing called society. And so by doing what you're doing, you're part of the happiness boom. And you're part of what I call Israel's happy warriors. That's one half of it. The second thing is you discovered on your honeymoon the most important thing in the world. And I don't care if you're a Sabbath observer or not. But when people ask me, oh my goodness, what are we going to do about social media? I have 3 words: turn it off.
Yeah.
So the fact that many people on the Sabbath turn it off for 25 hours is a great thing. The fact that you go off on vacation, you turn it off, is an amazing thing. The fact that when you turn it off, you realize 2 things. First of all, there's other things to do. But second of all the bile that comes through, all the tension that's there disappears, because ultimately it's artificial.
Yeah, it's manufactured. You don't need it.
Yeah, and I call this also the great Israel disconnect. From day to day, I wake up in the morning and I jog. I say hello to people in my neighborhood. I see people smiling. I passed this morning, Arabs also happily jogging, and sometimes you can see that they're with the hijabs. There are Arabs. Sometimes you can't see because we're all in our public of sport, looking ridiculous in our spandex. And then you see, come up close, and you might hear them talking. There are all these amazing stories in Israel, just like there are all these amazing stories in America, but nobody talks about them.
Right.
Because everybody's so busy hearing all the negativity and yelling and screaming. So let's use this 250th, and let's use every Sabbath as an opportunity to take a breath, to toast honeymooners, and to give ourselves maybe a little honeymoon every week, every month, every year, and certainly at the 250th.
So if I didn't want to be a raging pessimist and I wanted to, expand my scope of this message, where would I find this material that you guys have published for the 250th?
So the 250 Reasons to Thank America is an ebook, and it's on the Jewish Journal website. And the Essential Guide to the U.S.-Israel Partnership is on the JPPI website. And we also send out the PDF, so anybody who sends something to me, giltroy@gmail.com, we send out the PDF, and we're encouraging organizations. The way it worked with the 2 previous Essential Guides was that organizations took it on themselves. One organization printed out 10,000 copies, another 20,000 copies, and they spread them. We're not a publishing house, JPPI, the Jewish People Policy Institute. What we just do is create the material. We do all the we do all the formatting. We've got beautiful graphics. We send out the cover. We send out the content and say go. And the vision of my friend David Suissa with this 250 Reasons is to find a donor who's willing to print out 500,000 copies and give them to every American school kid.
Wow.
Wouldn't it be amazing if every kid got not only 250 reasons to thank America, but it came from something like the Jewish Journal.
Yeah.
And then you could see that we Jews are people of gratitude. We Jews are patriots. And one of the
People
exciting
of
things,
the books.
people of the book, right? and one of the exciting things about the list is once you start reading the list, I did 250, came easily. I could add another 250 today.
Yeah.
You keep on thinking, put this one in, eliminate that. Okay, not ice cream. What about deli? We have deli. And it's the high stuff, it's the low stuff, it's the fancy stuff, it's the big abstractions that make life great, like Declaration of Independence, freedom of speech, all men are created equal, which became all people are created equal, but also the little things in life that are delightful, and all these amazing technologies that make life work.
Oh, incredible. Well, this was nice. These conversations don't always end on a positive note. So, it's great to be back. It was good to have you back.
Always great to be
I'm
with you.
sure we'll reconvene in the next stage of the Israel-Iran America fiasco, whatever direction that turns. But no, in the meantime, I think we got a good message out of this, and yeah, it was just fun to look at.
Let's
So,
keep it going.
Yeah,
So,
thank you so much for coming.
right, and Mazal Tov. It was
Thank you.
exciting.
Well, that's all we had for this week's episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. It was a pleasure for me to be back. In the meantime, make sure to go to jpost.com to stay up to date with the latest Israel news. And happy birthday, America.